Okay, I think it's about time for me to place a bunch of music into a seemingly arbitrary list of significance. Gotta love the internet.
I think I got my swagger back. Oh.
There is no doubt in my mind that all you missed me, and feel free to share your admiration by slamming that like button and boosting my self-confidence in the comment section. Yeah, it's not even the end of the video, and I'm already shamelessly self-promoting. That's the kind of content I bring about on this modest little channel. Christian rock music. Depending on who you ask, the genre is either solid gold, tainted silver, or a sad, flaky piece of bronze. For all those silver and gold have I none types. I've always fallen somewhere in the middle when it comes to this issue, and while there is certainly a mountain of underwhelming content that gets a pass because, well, you know, they're Christians, there are quite a few groups that are far more than just a slightly edgy worship band. They're talented musicians that also happen to be Christians. Enter Skillet, formed way back in 1996. Yeah, that's probably before you were even born. Congratulations. Hailing from Memphis, Tennessee, Skillet's lineup has always revolved around frontman John Cooper, and after the inclusion of his wife Corey on keyboards and rhythm guitar, Lori Peters on drums, and eventually Ben Kasica on lead guitar, Skillet launched into the early 2000s with an intensity that rivaled a lot of their mainstream competitors. Also, this happened. After several years of brutal touring and the inclusion of the increasingly popular Jen Ledger on drums in 2008, Skillet was arguably the biggest name in Christian rock, moving millions of albums and selling out shows all over the world. But all that, while impressive, doesn't really answer the question that I posed earlier. And yes, that was a rhetorical question. The answer is a strong no. Popularity obviously doesn't automatically equal quality, so with all this in mind, where does Skillet fall in this debate? In order to answer this question, I'm going to present to you what I consider to be their 15 best songs, and after we're all done, maybe we can revisit the issue a little more clearly. Maybe, if I'm feeling generous.
You know you just can't kill a man when he's dead. You know the spirit's alive.
Despite the fact that I literally just said Skillet has been producing music since the mid-90s, I can see you already completely forgot and have no idea what you're looking at right now.
I thought their first album was Comatose.
Yeah, not even close. Okay, so right after Y2K ended up being little more than a dated punchline and technology was on everyone's good side once again, Skillet dropped an album somewhat ironically riddled with electronic samples provided by their newest member, Corey Cooper, and she did not hold back in the slightest. Obviously, Skillet doesn't sound even remotely like this anymore, and while I can only handle so much music that sounds like an old cell phone ringtone, Corey's programming here, as well as the catchy chorus and punchy production work, albeit a little dated, make the title track from Invincible stand out. Also, that hair alone deserves a place on this list.
I'm empty, lonely and accused without a word.
So, after the industrial sounds of Invincible, it didn't take long for Skillet to completely rebrand themselves into an angsty nu metal punch in the face. And what a glorious punch it was. Fingernails is a brutal monster of a song that rises from a pool of grainy distortion and spends over 4 minutes screaming in your face. It is beautiful. Losing your fingernails because you're forced to crawl through a pit of despair? Yeah, that's right up my alley. As far as Skillet's discography goes, I think everyone's on the same page when it comes to which album is their heaviest, but it's certainly up for debate which track is the heaviest from said album. I'm gonna go ahead and plant my metaphorical flag here. While there may have been other tracks on Collide that feature more screaming from John, the guitar riff on Fingernails is just a behemoth, and that coupled with Cooper's throat-shredding screams towards the end, it's really heavy in all the right ways. Rebirthing, the dramatic and epic opening track for Skillet's 2006 release. As the strings build anticipation, Lori's drums fill the room as a chorus of ascending voices quickly push us towards Ben's guitar riff that dive bombs into the mix flawlessly. Seriously, the production work on the first 20 seconds alone warrant the song a place on this list, but Cooper really brings his A game as a vocalist here. You can tell he's really pushing himself on those high notes, and I have so much respect for lead singers who force themselves outside a realm of ease and comfort. I think it brings a level of humanity and rawness to the music, but hey, maybe that's just because, you know, I'm not actually a human, so...
I'm gonna swim and drown in the wake of you.
time for another grossly underrated oldie. The Thirst is Taking Over, from Skillet's 2001 release, Alien Youth. For all you peeps out there who have been watching me for a second, there's a specific word that I tend to bring up a lot. The atmosphere, the creepy atmosphere, the atmosphere. That's right. Ambience. The delay work on the guitar, the subtle but undeniable drum presence in the mix, and that melody. My gosh, they definitely nailed that early 2000s sound. Yeah, you know the one. The Thirst is Taking Over takes its sweet time building up to the final drop, but when it arrives, it will shake you to the core. Yeah, believe it or not, the first time I heard the song, the drop caught me completely off guard, and it startled me, like I actually jumped. Wait, were you recording that? Okay, format everything. I want the SD card burned and the camera destroyed. Turn this thing up right now. Upon its release in 2016, Feel Invincible had longtime fans a bit divided on the squeaky clean production work and blatantly obvious attempts to push the single as a theme song for major sporting events. Some people labeled the move as selling out, while others realized that producing a catchy pop-infused rock song that has the ability to get stuck in the listener's head while simultaneously getting the crowd pumped up is not really the easiest thing to accomplish. Plus, what it did for Skillet is just wild. This song pretty much single-handedly managed to amass them an entirely new generation of fans almost 10 years after their mainstream success in 2009. Is Feel Invincible generic? Sure, but there's no denying it does a fantastic job of accomplishing its goal of making you stomp your feet and bop your head when you hear it, and continue playing it in your head long after it ended.
Something deep inside, it keeps my faith alive.
Alrighty kids, let's take a second to focus on the wonderful world of percussion. When most people think of Skillet and drumming, 90% of the time, Jen Ledger dominates that realm, and while she is remarkably talented in many arenas, behind every great Jedi stands a Jedi Master. And in this case, Lori Peters is that master. The amount of emotion in her playing, as well as the ability to confidently produce punchy drum fills, brings so much to every song she was involved with. And I think Collide is the perfect example of that fact. This, coupled with some really interesting production decisions like the distortion on John's voice during the verses, the slightly eerie backing vocals that accompany him, and a slew of subtle yet effective programming that Corey sprinkles throughout, makes this song a fantastic musical interpretation of the concept that Collide presents. What happens when faith and fear collide? It sounds like this song. Probably.
Every single day, I find it hard to say I could be yours alone.
There is quite a generous arsenal of solid power ballads to choose from when it comes to Skillet. Don't Wake Me, Say Goodbye, Lucy, and the list goes on. So many fantastic melodies poured into a big bowl of feels, and when they're really on point, they manage to avoid mixing too much cheese into the experience. Don't get me wrong, we've all had that dream where we're skinny dipping in a giant bowl of warm queso dip, but when you wake up and remember that too much of a good thing is actually terrifying, you realize what you just experienced was the worst nightmare of your life. 2 years later, you're up to your neck in therapy bills and you can't step within 15 yards of a Mexican food restaurant without hyperventilating. In other words, Yours to Hold does a fantastic job of showing Skillet's softer side without being too cheesy in the process. John's vocals have just the right amount of emotion wrapped around them as he croons about the difficulties of trying to connect with someone who struggles with vulnerability. It's a fantastic track and a great option for when you're looking to slow things down just a bit.
The secret side of me, I never let you see. I keep it caged, but I can't control it.
Okay, it's time to talk about the big one. The double platinum mega hit that launched Skillet to a whole new level of stardom. Yes, you have heard this song, and so have your parents, and quite possibly even your grandparents. Besides the obvious fact that the song is insanely catchy, one of the reasons it works so well is that monster guitar riff that Corey and Ben are simultaneously laying down. On a technical level, it's actually incredibly simple, but the genius lies in that perfectly positioned palm mute. It takes an okay riff that we've heard plenty of times before and makes it punchy and crunchy, like all good guitar riffs should be. For all you guitar players out there, let this be a lesson for you. When it comes to composing, it's not necessarily about how complex you can play. Sometimes it's about taking your knowledge of the instrument, even the simple techniques, and creating something that moves the listener. Now that movement can be physical, foot stomping, head banging, etc., or it can be emotional, like David Gilmour's guitar solo on Pink Floyd's Time, which makes me feel things deep inside my non-existent organs. But whatever you do, don't let those guitar prudes make you feel bad because your solo doesn't travel around the guitar neck 700 times. If it works, that's all that matters. And Monster, 100% works.
I don't wanna live, I don't wanna breathe. There's a failure next to me. You're tired.
While Skillet has marinated in quite a few different pots and pans over the years, the mid to late 2000s found them utilizing their namesake to its full potential by frying up a delicious mixture of heavy guitars, soothing piano, cinematic strings, quality production work, and memorable melodies that pair quite nicely with Cooper's rough vocals. It's the recipe that fans all over the world point to when they're talking about Skillet, and after Rebirthing functioned as a quality appetizer, Comatose came out of the kitchen with a kick that had even the naysayers admitting,
"Yeah, that chorus was pretty darn punchy."
It's Skillet being Skillet, and loving every minute of it. Okay, so I'm gonna break the format just a little bit here and include a second song for the number 6 spot. While one could argue that these songs are pretty much the same thing and therefore interchangeable, if I break them down, it's almost hilarious how certain aspects I'm not crazy about in one are much more appealing in the other. For example, the intro and first verse on Not Gonna Die is significantly better than on Awaken Alive, but I find the pre-chorus and chorus of Awaken Alive to be far more memorable and catchy. Does this mean the parts I like less are bad? Not at all. Both songs are great from start to finish, but considering the similarities between the two and consistent tones, I feel justified in picking and choosing. Much like Comatose, these two tracks perfectly display that Skillet sound I was previously talking about. But here, there is something just a little different. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. It is time to talk about the one, the only, Jen Ledger. Drummer, singer, and yet another hair dye enthusiast. Her inclusion in the band back in 2008 was huge for the group. Not that Lori wasn't fantastic and immensely talented, because my gosh was she ever, but Jen's likable personality coupled with her consistently improving abilities on the drums and impressive vocal talents made her a huge asset. While I personally prefer Jen's voice on Awaken Alive, both of these songs perfectly display her skill set, and it's no wonder fans started pining for more from her. Okay, I want to cover one more thing before we move on. Both of these songs feature different guitarists, Ben Cassica on Awaken Alive and Seth Morrison on Not Gonna Die. Both remarkably talented and fantastic at executing complex solos, but I do believe there is a subtle difference between the two of them, and I think these tracks do a good job of bringing their unique strengths to the table. Seth's guitar solo on Not Gonna Die is technical and employs some very fast sweep picking, which is extremely impressive, while Ben's solo on Awaken Alive feels slightly more emotional and the melody complements the chorus perfectly. What do I mean by this? Well, I think Seth is the better player, while Ben is the better composer. And yes, once again, I realize all of you guitar worshippers might be freaking out over this perspective, but I said it, and now it's on the internet forever, so ha. Alright, Savior, the lead single from Collide. This song is,
It's interesting to me how most of the time we don't really get to pick the music that has a profound impact on our lives. Art comes and goes, and occasionally a person hears a song at a specific moment in time or sees a movie over a very important weekend, and all of a sudden it becomes personal. Growing up, my siblings and I were pretty sheltered, and there was a time, I'm embarrassed to say, I actually thought Jesus Freak was the heaviest song ever recorded. I remember one time I was looking over a Christian music website and happened to come across a rock band called Skillet, and they were promoting a new single from their album Collide, and that song was Savior. And I couldn't stop listening to the little 30-second sample that was on the website, and something about it was just so different from anything I'd ever heard. Obviously, hindsight is 20/20, and when I look back, I very much understand and realize that it was definitely a product of its time, and there were many other songs that sounded similar, but for me, I had never heard anything like it. When my brother and I finally worked up the nerve to download the full song with an iTunes gift card that we had received for Christmas, I vividly remember the blood running into my toes when I heard John Cooper screaming during the bridge. The funny thing is, less than a day after we downloaded it, my brother ended up deleting the thing entirely from our iTunes library because he got worried that our parents would find out and get upset about it. It wasn't too long after that we ended up just downloading the whole album. So that should really tell y'all something. I liked the song so much I ended up buying it twice. Almost overnight, rock became a massive part of my life, and it didn't take long before my iPod was filled with the likes of Linkin Park, Chevelle, Breaking Benjamin, and Evanescence, just to name a few. And I owe a lot of this in part to Savior by Skillet.
Falling in the blood, slipping through the cracks, falling to the depths, can I ever go back? Dreaming of the way it used to be. Can you hear me?
Falling Inside the Black always kind of felt like the underdog track from Comatose, and while it may not be as popular as a lot of the other songs from the album, it holds a very special place in my heart for a very specific reason. Like I said before, my parents definitely kept us pretty sheltered as kids, but after high school started, things definitely changed, especially for my dad. The week Comatose came out, some friends of mine were playing the album over the loudspeakers at our church's youth group on Sunday night, and my dad just happened to be volunteering then. I had never really mentioned bands like Skillet to him before because I always just kind of assumed he wouldn't be even remotely interested, but to my utter surprise, he actually was loving it, and at one point he even started singing one of the songs. After we bought the album, the hard copy, we would often think that it had been misplaced or we lost it, only to end up finding it in our dad's car, and he was constantly wanting to borrow it and listen to it and could just never seem to get enough of Comatose. I was never really very close to my dad before high school, and bands like TFK and Skillet allowed my brother and I to really build a relationship with him. I know this might seem like a stupid reason to have this song so high on the list, but Falling Inside the Black was always his favorite song from the album, and I want to dedicate the number 4 spot to him.
Doesn't matter what I do, nothing's gonna change. I'm never good enough.
John Cooper's lyrics have been all over the board throughout Skillet's existence. One minute he's crooning about how good it is to be alive, and then the very next he's screaming about his imperfections. But Open Wounds is something different. It's a really vulnerable peek behind the curtain, and a rare one at that, but sometimes that's all it takes to leave a profound impact. Before I move forward, I want to make something abundantly clear as to not create confusion. Both my parents are great people and have always supported me 110%, so what I'm about to say does not apply to them. As someone who's been passionate about movies and music for a very long time, I always pour a lot of myself into every project I do, and there's been a handful of times in my life where individuals very close to me have called into question my morality because of the things that I've created and the projects that I've worked on. The message never seemed to matter because the delivery of the message was either too loud or too scary, and that therefore made the message not important anymore. And I would sometimes be made to feel like I wasn't a good person for expressing myself in that manner. When a person pours so much of themselves into a project and spends weeks and months working on it and then finally shares it with the world, and then someone who's supposed to love you and support you in a way and just basically openly brands your work as evil, it just sucks. It sucks. While there are certainly millions of angsty rock songs that cover similar type topics, something about the lyrics just really spoke to me. It honestly was one of the first songs, or one of the earliest songs that I remember just really getting something profound out of lyrically. And I started to realize how important lyrics can be when it comes to making music that can have a profound impact on the listener.
If you believed when I said I'd be better off without you, then you never really knew me at all.
I'm I'm not sure how many of y'all have been with me from the beginning of my channel, but one of the earliest album reviews to really take off was my video of Awake, and it's still one of my most popular uploads, even though it's terrible. I was definitely new to the whole listening to music critically thing, but even back then, Believe really stood out to me as something special, despite the fact that no one was talking about it. And while my perspective on music has drastically changed over the years, and I disagree with 90% of my past videos, this might be the only thing that I still 100% agree with. Believe is the best song from Awake. Unlike the rest of Skillet's love songs, Believe is heart-wrenching with how raw and real it is, and considering the fact that John has dedicated it to Corey multiple times while performing it live, it makes it all the more vulnerable. As a married man, I've come to discover just how complex love can be, and I hate the fact that I brought my wife to tears on multiple occasions because of my delusional arrogance. But the beautiful thing about love is the fact that we can fall back on a firm foundation that we've spent years cultivating and pouring into. And I think that's what marriage is ultimately all about, is just holding on to that reality that at the end of the day, things are going to get rough, and there's going to be arguments, and there's going to be disagreements, and there's going to be hurt feelings, but we can look back at everything we've built together between us, and it means something. I think that's what John was trying to get at with this song, is just asking Corey, as well as just a listener in general, to believe in the concept of marriage and believe in what love can be. Because, like I said before, love is complex, and there's going to be times where you're just sick of each other and you're just upset, and just hold on and continue to build and pour into that foundation and make it a solid, positive foundation. It's some great stuff, but it's not quite the number one song I have picked out for this video. So before I jump into the number one song, I'm going to go ahead and share a few honorable mentions.
All alone, lost in this abyss, crawling in the dark. This is how we rise up, heavy as a hurricane, louder than a freight train. Stay up late and we talk all night in a dark room lit by the TV light. Kill me, kill me, kill me, kill me, on and on. Am I just another man whose time went fast? What does it take to be called great?
Okay, so here's what I think is the number one Skillet song of all time. And the mid-2000s were really a fantastic time for Christian rock music. Flyleaf, Red, Amberlin, Thousand Foot Crutch, Disciple, Family Force 5, Switchfoot, Emery, Reliant K, Hawk Nelson, Falling Up, Cutlass. They were all releasing music that many considered to be their best during that time. And while there was definitely quite a few songs that I loved, there was really one that stood above all the others, and it was Skillet's Whispers in the Dark. The second I heard that opening guitar lick, I was hooked, and honestly, I love it just as much now as I did back then. I vividly remember in high school that I could never listen to it just once. I think one time I even got up to listening to it 5 times in a row. I just really loved it, and interestingly, it actually played a pretty major role in helping me decide what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. Outside the house that we grew up in, we had this pretty heavy-duty swing set. I used to go outside after the sun had set and swing while listening to music for honestly hours at a time. Like most kids that age, there were definitely days where I would just be mulling over high school drama and whatnot, but more often than not, my imagination would take me to music video sets for all my favorite songs, and I would dream up story ideas and think of all the cool camera angles I could use to take all these songs that meant so much to me and make them even better. It was songs like Whispers in the Dark that really got my imagination flowing and allowed me to determine that what I wanted to do with my future was heavily involved with music and video production. Now, about that question that got posed at the beginning of the video, is Skillet a good rock band? Personally, of course they are. They played a major role in my life and helped me discover who I was, and they helped me get through a variety of personal struggles and really helped me fall in love with a whole new genre of music that I didn't really realize existed before. From a critical perspective, I completely understand people that have a hard time with Skillet because of the fact that they aren't necessarily bringing anything brand new to the table. I mean, when you listen to their first album, they're definitely trying to go for that kind of Nirvana sound in the 90s, and then in the early 2000s they definitely jumped on the Linkin Park bandwagon, and even their more recent work is definitely leaning more on the pop side of things because of the lack of rock on the Billboard charts and whatnot. And I don't really have a problem with Skillet trying to stay relevant, because obviously a band has to do what it's got to do to survive in this day and age. My issue with Skillet is the fact that I feel like these days they're kind of trapped in a formula that they've built for themselves. And I was looking at the track listing for their upcoming album that's supposed to be released in August, and almost 75% of the songs I feel like I've already heard before, and that's based off of the titles alone. I mean, songs like Rise Up and Back to Life, it's just... Now, I could be totally wrong. This new album might knock my socks off, and I would love to enjoy a new Skillet album. I don't know. Maybe I should do a live video where I listen to the album for the first time and I can give my thoughts on it or something. Might be interesting. At the end of the day, Skillet has left a profound impact on my life, and I think this probably goes without saying, but they are one of the best Christian rock bands of all time. Okay, freeze. I know I've already shared this on the channel quite a few times, so I apologize in advance if this is redundant, but my wife and I are making some rock music together, and our band name is Crushing Plains, and we have a song on Spotify. It's called Achilles Heel, and we would love to know what y'all think about it. So if y'all haven't heard it already, please feel free to jump on over there and give it a listen. We really hope that you enjoy it. It's kind of got a bit of a post-grunge, heavy type vibe, and I think it's pretty cool. We also have an Instagram, we have a Facebook page, and a YouTube channel. So I'll be sure to link that at the end of the video, and I'll leave Instagram, Spotify links, all stuff like that in the comment section. I mean, not the comment section, the video description. I can't talk. It's late. You guys have no idea how late it is. Thanks so much for supporting the channel. And if you're new, please be sure to subscribe, because I'm going to try to release some more content in the very near future. So thanks again, everyone.